So today I have put some of the learning objectives and some of the steps that I'll be doing today with my abstract floral piece. So I'll read them out to you. So step 1, which will hopefully take 20 minutes, I'll start with a red acrylic underpainting and sketching. Step 2, I'll add the first layer of my oil paints with my large paintbrush, and that will take another 20 minutes. Then 40 minutes in, step 3, I'll use my palette knife to add textures and build colours. And step 4, I'll finish off with highlights and final adjustments. So I'm going to show you some of the equipment that I'll be using. Let me turn my camera angle to my canvas. So as you can see at the top, these are the images which I'll be painting. I'm going to combine them. I just found them off Google. So I'll be painting this purple flower and I'll be painting these two. And I really like painting roses, so that's what I selected. And hopefully this lesson will take around 2 hours, or this session, and I've put my previous painting in the background so that you can see the type of abstract floral design that I'm going for. And let me zoom in for you. So I'm hoping to add all of these textures with the painting that I'm going to be doing today. This painting, I think I did it last week or 2 weeks ago, and it's called Flower Bed. Okay. So the canvas size that I'm working with today, let me readjust my camera. Just bear with me. There we go. So the canvas size that I am working with is 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters. So I've already unwrapped the canvas, and other equipment that I'll be using is, of course, to start off, I'll be using an old plastic palette, and I've got my water, and I've got my flat paint brushes. So I've got 25 millimeters and 12 millimeters as well. And yeah, so that's what I'm going to use to start off doing my red acrylic underpainting with, and this very small round brush, size 4. That's a round brush. So I'm going to start by pouring my paints into my old palette. It's just a takeaway lid I've used for this because when I start doing my oil painting, I won't be using this palette. The paint is a bit dry at the top, so I have to just remove the dry paint so I can pour the paint into the palette. So just a bit of red paint. And I like to start off all of my paintings with a red or pinkish underpaint. And then I'm going to be adding some white. Not that much white actually. And then with my flat brush, I just dip it in some water and mix a little bit of this paint and just try and see, try and get the composition. So I'm going to start out with this being the main focal point. Let me start off here. I'm making it quite big. Start off here with a circle. And as you can see, it goes round and round and round. So that's what I'm going to try and achieve with the petals. Sorry, I can't see any comments right now in the chat. I think that's because I've done the video vertical, so the comments aren't showing up. So I just do a few round petals around the center of the painting or of the flower. I started off with the center, now I'm just going to go around with sort of oval shapes. Because it's abstract, I don't really need to do it too accurate to the original image, just as long as it looks similar enough. So a technique that I use when I'm painting flowers, as I said, I just start at the center and then I add oval shapes around it. And you can see I'm going to do this big leaf here. I'm hoping that I can finish this painting within 2 hours. And I'm working on the second sort of medium size petal. And I'm just working my way around. I'm just wrapping the rose. I want the rose to be quite big on the canvas. Like my other painting, the flowers take up the majority of the canvas. One of the reasons I use acrylic for the underpainting instead of oil paints, because I paint with water mixable oils, is because acrylics will take quicker to dry. And then once I've done the underpainting, I can add on top with the additional layers of oil. And I like to use red as a primary color because when I add the additional colors on the top, I found that red is the one that highlights, if that makes sense, highlights the other colors the most, makes them seem more bold when they're added on the top. I'm just about finishing off the first element of the sketch. And now I'm going to fill it in with my, because it's quite a small canvas, so I'll fill it in with my 12mm brush. If I was using a larger canvas, I'd be working with bigger brushes. This is my bucket of brushes that I regularly use. So I've got a lot more brushes. I'd say I have around 200 to 300 brushes. I haven't counted them, but yeah, I do like to use this 75 millimeter, sorry, when I'm painting on the larger canvases, because it covers the surface area a lot quicker. But this time I'm just going to be using my small brush, and then I'm going to be mixing this with a lot of water so it's translucent when I add it to the canvas. I'm painting my roses. I'm going to paint it in at different thicknesses because I don't want them all to be the same shade, or else the underpainting would have been completely pointless. So might even add a bit of yellow to my palette just so I can have some additional shades. Have to really shake the paint just a little bit. I haven't really been painting florals. I only started painting florals recently and I quite enjoy it because it's very therapeutic. I forgot to play some royalty-free music in the background, so I might put that on a bit later. Yeah, I'm just continuing to fill in the other areas of the rose with my red acrylic paint. Maybe I'll just do a bit of shading. I like to paint quite fast and not spend too long on each section. So it's been 17 minutes so far, and the underpainting I aimed for it to take me around 20 minutes, so I may run a bit behind schedule, so let's give myself half an hour to finish this underpainting. So I'm just going to add a bit of white, mix it with my reds. Continue to add so it's still a long way to go until it looks like my painting to the left, because I still need to add my oil paints, which I will do later on tonight. I was planning on adding 3 flowers to this one, but I might just for now stick to this one flower. We'll see how the night goes. I like to paint in the evenings because I think it's more peaceful. So a lot of the times I start painting at midnight and finish painting at around 4 a.m. But today it's an early day for me today. So yeah, this paintbrush is actually a bit too thick for the rest of the petals, so I'm going to go into my bucket to see if I can find a smaller one. Maybe I'll use this 6 size 6 flat brush. Yeah. I'm just making it a bit more flexible. It's a bit stiff at the moment. That's fine. Mix a bit of my yellows in here. And do a bit more shading. Yeah, I'm not being too careful because this is just the initial layer. In fact, I think this is fine now. So just scribble this in. Okay, so I'm now done with this floral underpainting. So I'm just going to paint the background red so I can move back to using my bigger brush. Let's use this 25mm. I want to do it so my palette isn't red anymore, so I'm just going to add a bit more red. I didn't actually end up using much of the white, so I just likely wasted all of this white. When I squeeze my paint into the palette, oil paints or acrylics, I don't usually squeeze too much because I don't like to waste paint. I think a mistake a lot of people make, especially beginner painters, is that they squeeze a lot of paint onto the palette and then it just ends up becoming very muddy, and you only really need to use a little bit. Oh, Andy said something, but I missed it. When someone comments something, it just disappears after a while, so I didn't really catch that. I'm trying to look at the camera just to make sure everything's in frame, and also keep an eye at on my canvas at the same time. But yeah, all I'm going to do is really just paint this one shade. I've got some exciting projects happening this year, 2025. Exciting art projects which I'm excited to share. I'll be uploading some videos talking about that. They're in progress right now, just editing the videos. And I thought in the meantime, while I edit my YouTube videos, why not get on a live? I'm running out of paint again, so I'm just going to squeeze a bit more into my palette. So this palette, I actually ordered some takeaway from the restaurant Zizi, the Italian restaurants, and they had these really cool lids, and I thought I don't really want to throw it away. I'm just going to use it for my palette. I'm going to throw it away eventually though, but I've got a few of these lids, so I use them every now and again. Just stored away in my art cupboard. I used to do my underpainting with oil paints, and then I'd wait a good 12 to 24 hours for my underpainting to dry, and it just wasn't a good use of my time. But what I often do when I was waiting for my underpainting to dry, I'd start on a different painting. So I'd be working on multiple paintings at once. But I found that using acrylics for underpainting is just better. I've been using oil paints for around 12 years now. I started off with acrylics. Most artists don't start off with oil paints, they start off with acrylics because it's easier to learn with. But as soon as I started using oil paints, I just fell in love and I didn't want to go back. So I may do a video discussing the benefits and the differences. Okay, so that is my underpainting complete, and I think it's looking like a hot mess at the moment. So actually it's quite wet. I'm gonna zoom in so you can see. So I'm probably gonna have to give it a few minutes to dry. I did say that I was gonna order a hairdryer off Amazon to speed up the process because it's very long to wait. But in the meantime, so let's take another look at my learning objectives, what I'm going to achieve by the end of this session. So I have done the red acrylic underpainting and sketching. I did say that was going to take me 0 to 20 minutes, but I think it's taken me around half an hour. So the next step is to add the first layer of my oil paints with my paintbrush. I'm going to get my palette, my oil painting palette, so it is quite different. Oh, I've seen the chat now. Do you study art, Deandra? You should keep your favorite. Oh, it's disappeared again. I did study art at university. I did a fine art degree, but I'm a self-taught artist. I taught myself how to paint and draw when I was quite young, and then I thought to myself, you know, I live in England, and so why not study a fine art degree? So I graduated a few years ago. So yeah, I also teach art as well. Why have I got an alarm going off? I'm going to dismiss. So this is my oil painting palette, which I'm going to use. I've already got oil paints on there from a previous painting I did a few days ago, and because oil paints take so long to dry, so I didn't want to waste them, so I just left them on here. It's my Bob Ross palette. And yes, I'm going to be using this palette to paint with, and I'm going to show you my oil paints. So I think I want this painting to be a similar color scheme to this one. I like kind of pinks and pastels. So just checking if I have all of the correct colors. So I've used some greens. I can't pronounce these oil paint colors. Oh, my mum's just having a peek in at the door. Hello, you alright? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So a color that I'm going to use in this painting is, how do you pronounce it? Magenta. Magenta. Yeah. So I'm gonna add a bit more magenta onto my palette. Can you hold it for me quickly? Oh. So when I'm adding paints, I do it quite, is it sparsely or scarcely? because oil paints are very expensive and I don't like to waste oil paints, which is why, as I said, I haven't washed the palette off. So okay, I've added magenta. What other colours do I need to... I'm going to show you how I mix the colours as well. So this is purple, and I don't think I have purple, so I've got magenta, I've got red, and I've got blues on here already, so I don't need anything additional to mix for the purple flower. But I do need additional white because I always use a lot of white paint when I'm creating something. So. Okay. So these are my paints that I'm going to continue using. And let me see if this is dry. It's not dry yet. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put some royalty-free music on. So I'll be back in around 2 minutes. Hey, I am back. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to put some royalty-free music on because the laptop is in use. But let me continue the painting. So I'm going to be using my Bob Ross palette. I think it's size 10. And I'm going to start off by mixing colors while I still wait for the acrylic paint to dry. So I'm going to be mixing purple. So I'm going to take a bit of the magenta and I'm going to put it, let's put it here. And then some blue. Put that next to the magenta. Yeah, to create purple you only need purple and blue, but I'm going to use some white as well. Or red and blue. Don't know if I said purple and blue. Then take some of this cadmium red. Because the paint is a few days old, it's actually quite a bit too thick, but I'm just going to make do. I should have put some cling film over it. So, okay, let's mix the paints. So I just scrape it and then I'm gonna scrape it into the magenta is actually quite purpley anyway, pinky purple. And I don't want to create that exact purple colour because I do want my painting to be a bit more pastel. So I'm going to use this darker shade of blue and mix it in to see. So when I mix paints and when I apply them to my canvas, I quite like there to be some extra streaks left in the paint palette knife, just because it gives a nice, more abstract effect, I feel. So I think I've achieved for the first layer of oil paint, or the first oil paint, what I want. I think for this painting I will work mainly with a palette knife instead of a paintbrush. So it gives more of an abstract feel. So I think I'm going to start with this bottom leaf here because it's more dry than the other areas. So now that I've got my scoop of paint, let me make it a bit thinner. Yeah, I've got my scoop of paint and I'm just going to apply the first scoop using my palette knife to the leaf. So I'm doing this one at the bottom. I'm going to try and readjust my camera so you have more of a visual, an accurate visual. I'm just going to scrape it inwards from the outer sections. So you can see, because I use different shades, it's actually coming up with quite a nice streaky effect. Don't know why my phone camera is so zoomed out. Don't know how to zoom in. But yeah, I've done the first scoop. And now I'm going to do the second one, going down this way. And now I'm going to do it coming out from the inside of the petal. In fact, if you look at the reference image, the inside of the petal is a bit darker than the outside of the petal. So what I'm going to do is, with my palette, I'm going to add a darker shade of blue. And something to note is, if you look at all of my colors, I don't actually use black. I do have black oil paint. I'll show you my black oil paint. And it's still quite full because I don't use black oil paint. I just use it to add my signature, and sometimes add details. And it's something that my art teacher said to me when I was in high school. She said, don't paint with black. I used to paint with acrylics, so she said, don't paint with black at all, learn to mix your own black. And I found that advice very, very helpful. So I have learned to mix my own black. This does look black in the camera, but it's actually a very, very dark blue. So I'm just going to use this dark blue. Oh, the paint is really, really dry now. Okay, so I've added the dark blue and I'm going to mix it with the magenta to create a darker shade of purple. So I'm going to use this darker shade of purple to work from the inside of the petals towards the outside to create shading and light and dark composition. Okay. Just going to add a few dark shades on the outside of the leaf. Just do a bit of blending. And yeah, that is one petal done. And let's see where else is dry. I don't know why the acrylic is taking so long to dry. Maybe I forgot how long acrylic actually does take to dry because I haven't painted with acrylics in so long really. So, okay. Let's work on this petal. So if I wasn't, so if all of the acrylics were actually dry, I would work from the outside towards the inside. But how I'm working now is just based on which areas are the most dry. But the acrylic will dry eventually. Just gonna zoom the phone in a bit more. I'm not really zooming the phone in, I'm just repositioning my camera. Don't know if that is any better. Okay. So I'm not going to do anything else with my palette knife. I'm just going to just add a bit more purple. And white. Mix it. And shade this petal in. Now that that one is shaded, then yeah, I actually think I'm going to work on the background. So yeah, sorry about the order. It's just that I didn't anticipate on the acrylics taking so long to dry. I'm definitely going to buy a hairdryer. And I'm going to still be using my palette knife to paint the background, but yeah, I'm going to make it more pink tones So just going to use my magenta and mix my magenta with white and add it to my palette. Because I've already got blue on here, it's coming out a bit purple, which is fine. Just add a bit more red, cadmium red. And some more white. A bit of a lilac colour. I think I'm happy with this lilac colour, so I'm just going to start I'm not really being too careful, just random strokes. I'm going to go over this with my paintbrush a bit later. I just want to get the oil paint off the palette knife, and I'm using my canvas to get the oil paint off, because why not? And then I've already got a type of pink colour on here, a very light pink, so I'm going to add that. Using my palette knife and just scrape the colours. So this is quite an enjoyable process because I'm not being too careful, and it actually comes, the effect of this is actually quite nice. And as we get in towards the floral petals, I'm going to make it a bit lighter, so I'm going to add my white paint and just scrape it. So I'm just working on the background as the roses dry, the acrylic rose underpainting dries. Add in the oil paints. And add a bit more white. Sorry, I'm trying to put it in a way so you can see. The red looks really good in the back beneath the white oil paints. Just going to continue to scrape. And I think around the top edges, I'm going to add a darker shade of pink and purple. So let me just grab that with my palette knife and just apply it directly onto the canvas. And I am running out of paints, so we're going to go over here again, and I'm going to add more paint onto my palette. We're going to go in with my crimson, Alizarin Crimson Red. Let me add it here. So as I said, I don't add too much paint to my palette, and that's why a lot of the times I have to get up and add more paint during a painting session, which is fine because that way I don't waste paint and it's not thrown away. All of it ends up being used, which is really good. So we're going to add some more magenta. Haven't really started with the yellows yet, but I'm definitely going to be adding yellows to my painting. So because I'm using quite a bit of magenta, I'm going to add a bit more. Still not a lot. I need to order some more paint soon because I'm running out of almost all of my colours except black because I don't use black. And okay, let's use some more white. I recently ordered this white paint, but it's already finishing, so I have to order some more of this as well. Okay, squeeze. Comes out like toothpaste. And let's add other types of red, other colours of cadmium red. So I'm going to add the cadmium red here to my palette. This red is quite orange actually, cadmium red hue. Some yellow tones in there. And then this is another shade of cadmium red. Let's see what it's called. Cadmium red deep hue, so it's a bit darker. Cadmium red deep hue. So I've got a few shades of red. Okay, that's all the paints I'm going to add. Actually, this is quite a good angle. So this is how my palette is looking at the moment. Just gonna see if my, yeah, it's not dry yet, the acrylic underpainting. Just going through a bit more mixing of my paint. Just got this cloth. I'm going to wipe off the current colours on my Bob Ross palette knife. Dip it in water and wipe it off some more. Then I can mix some more pink shades, I think. Or I'm actually looking here and thinking it would look quite nice with some yellow. So I already pre-mixed this yellow for a different painting. So I think I'm just going to add some yellow here just because I think it would look quite nice. So let's add some. There you go. So that was quite random. Just to create a more abstract background. Then I think this top right corner, I'm going to make it quite yellow as well. So, okay. Or should I make it light blue? Let me think about it. Give myself 10 seconds to think about it. Okay, I've decided to make this top right corner light blue. So, okay, let me grab this blue and mix. Oh, okay. I forgot that my palette knife already had some yellow on it. So let me wipe off my palette knife before I do any more mixing. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to do this top corner, a light blue. I'm just going to use the blues that I have at the moment. So as I said, this is blue even though it looks black. Now that I'm scraping it into the clear palette, you can definitely tell it's blue. And then put it more in the center and mix my white paint with that to create a light blue. So I haven't mixed it completely all the way through, so it has a streaky effect. And as I said, I like the streaky effect, so I'm going to add it to my canvas, scrape it down. And the thing is, even though I'm doing it light blue now, I can always change my mind and change the color if I don't think it's right in the end. So making it light blue, it was quite an impulsive decision just because it just looked like it needed to be light blue. And I do like to blend the background with a sponge. With my painting on the top left over there, I did do a lot of blending with sponge even after I added with the palette knife, because that creates a different texture also. So I'm going to do a bit of blending or tapping, dabbing with the sponge. It creates a very nice effect, especially because I've got different colors on the sponge, so the colors will actually go across on here as well. So it will have a bit of blues, and I've got a bit of yellow now. So that's another technique I use. And also, so some areas I'm not going to blend it too much because I like the thick impasto look. And then let's say here, I'm going to blend it a bit more. to create a sky-like, cloudy, dreamy, ethereal look. I think that's looking quite nice at the moment. And something I also do is, I mean, this is such a big palette. Okay, so I also use my sponge to grab paint, and then I apply it directly onto the canvas as well. And then do a bit of blending. That's quite fun too. I'm just gonna blend it all the way down. I think I want the bottom to be quite dark, so I've actually run out of blue on my palette, so I'm just gonna put my palette on the floor and grab some blue from my paints. I'm gonna grab all of the blues actually that I have. So these are the 3 blues that I actually use. I use, I'm not going to pronounce it, but this blue and this blue. Let me zoom in so you can see what it's called without me having to say the name out loud. And what I'm going to do now is, because I wanted the bottom left of the painting to be darker, so I'm going to use Prussian blue. And the technique that I do occasionally, sometimes when I'm feeling lazy or sometimes when I just want to get a thicker layer, is add the tube and the paint directly onto the canvas. So the bottom left is going to be a bit darker, and I'm going to also add a bit of this blue. I think I'm just going to add one dab. Oh, okay, 2 dabs. And then I'm going to be using my brush. Let me wash out my paintbrush that I used to do the underpainting. I actually need to get another refill of water as well. Washing out my paintbrushes. Let's dry it. And then just going to blend the blue into the canvas with my paintbrush, painting an upward and inward direction. So the reason I'm painting the bottom left dark blue is to add a bit more of a light vs dark composition for the background, because I'm not using a realistic background or grass or anything, or the flower's not going to be in a vase, so I just want to add a bit more shading in the background, and there's a bit more of a contrast. It's not all one shade. I thought it would look quite nice as well. Sometimes I can picture things in my head. So I need to blend the paintbrush with water, but before I do that, I'm just going to, let me turn my camera. You can see a bit more of my studio. This section is a bit messy. Let me refill my water. Go. Turn my camera back facing my canvas. You can see now that the background is filling in, that the painting is really coming together. So I'm going to use my paintbrush, dip it in water to make it easier to blend. And I do like the dripping effect as well, so I can even add some of the blue paints to the top and let the water drip. It's quite nice. A lot of my paintings have a dripping effect. I think one of the hardest decisions as an artist when I'm painting is, when is a painting resolved, as in when is a painting complete? Oh no. Okay. So I did lean this up on the floor and the oil paint has fallen onto the floor, so I'm gonna have to scrape the oil paint up from the floor. So just bear with me, give me a moment while I do that. There we go. All this fell onto the floor, so I'm just going to add that back onto my palette. And then there's another one that I need to scoop from the floor. Okay. So let me add this one back onto my palette as well. Okay, that was annoying. Okay, so I'm just going to continue with the bottom of this painting. I'm not sure if I want it to be light or dark blue, but you know what, with my sponge, let me just blend the two blues together. So I'm just going to pull this across. There we go. And pull this down to blend the two blues. And that does give a really nice effect actually. So yeah, I'm finished for now with my background. I might add a bit to it later, but I think for now I'm done. So yeah, I took a break from doing the flower because the acrylic paint was still wet and I was waiting for it to dry. So now that the acrylic paint is mainly dry, as you can see, I've got no red coming, well, a little bit of red, but barely any coming onto my fingers. So I'm going to continue with my rose and the petals. Okay, so let's work on this one. And you know what? Let me use this paintbrush, since I've been using it already, to block in the colours. I said I wasn't going to use a paintbrush because I just wanted to use a palette, but let me just use the paintbrush. Because my target was to finish this painting within 2 hours, but it's already 1 hour and 12 minutes since I started. So it might be quicker if I use my paintbrush. So, okay, I'm looking at my reference image. Let me make my reference image be here. Okay, so it's in frame of the camera. I'm looking at my reference image and I'm working on this petal. So I think a good color to use is this one. Just adding it loosely, adding my paints loosely onto my canvas. Kind of following the direction of my underpainting. And then just wiping off my paintbrush slightly onto the sponge so I can add more shading. I'm going to use my palette knife to add shading. Let me use this one, size 14. So I'm going to do a bit of white on the outside and drag it in. So here is my white. Ooh. Take my oil paint up with my palette knife, add it to the outside of the petal and just drag in the colors in to create depth and to also keep it abstract. Just going to tap in. Well, that blends quite well. So I just scraped the palette knife this way, so it kind of looks like the rose is kind of coming outside of the canvas as well. And then, yeah, make it a bit more, just kind of like dragging the. Okay, so we're done with this petal for now. I'm going to come back to it, but now I'm going to be working on this one, which on the picture is this one. So I'm going to be using a dark purple, and I've actually run out of dark purple, so I'm going to be mixing that again. So I've got my different reds, and purple, you create purple with reds and blues, so I'm just going to use a bit of all of them. Red, red, red. It doesn't need to be completely accurate colors to the reference image, because that's not really what I'm going for. So I've just mixed all of the reds together, and now I'm going to add my dark blue. And I forgot I don't actually have any dark blues on my palette, but thankfully this blue is right next to me. So I'm just going to add this blue to my palette. Let me open it. Yes, I'm using my Samsung phone to film this video, so it's not the best. Definitely need to invest in better equipment eventually. Okay, so put my blue onto my palette. Okay, and now using my palette knife that I was using before, mix the blues in with the reds to create a dark purple. So I just use a tiny bit of the blue and then just mix that. And the colour's a bit brown actually. It's turning into a brown. I think I want to add a bit more of this magenta to create more of the purple that I want. And maybe a different shade of blue as well. This is a nice purple. I think I'm going to leave a bit of this purple for later on, and then add a different shade of blue. I'm going to be adding this blue. Yeah, it's really nice using water mixable oil paints actually, because then I don't have to use the solvent white spirit, because white spirit gives me a headache. So when I use water mixable oils, because I mix and wash the paintbrushes off with the water, I think it's a lot healthier. And to be honest, there's not much difference with actual normal oil paints and water mixable oil paints in texture and also in price, in my opinion, as long as you have a good brand. So I like to use Winsor & Newton. When I was younger and I didn't have as much money, I used cheaper brands of oil paints, but they don't have the same quality and pigmentation, so you can really tell the difference if you use a cheaper quality oil paint. Okay, so I can't remember what I said I was going to do. Okay, this blue. I was going to mix more of this blue into my palette. Oh, that does create a nice purple actually. Okay. And add a bit of white to that. Okay, I think it needs a bit more red or magenta. Yeah, So as you can see, when I'm mixing colors, I just add the tiniest amount of each color. Because if you add too much, then you won't get the color that you desire. You can always add more and more and more. So I'm just going to add a bit more magenta. And it's still a bit too blue, so I'm going to add a bit of this cadmium deep hue. See if that gives me the purple that I want. I think this is the color that I'm looking for. No, it's a bit towards the blue side still, but that's fine. Okay, I did say I was working on this particular leaf, so I'm gonna start on the outside and go inwards. And what I did want as well is for the background and the outside of the rose petal to be similar colors, but different textures. So it kind of blends in. That's quite nice. Just scrape upwards with my palette knife, and then maybe scrape a bit downwards. Create an edge. There we go. Then I think the next petal, so I'm going to come back to all of these petals. It's just the first layer. I'm going to refine it a bit later on. So the next petal I'm going to work on, I mean, it still has a bit of drying left, but it's just the next one I want to work on. So is this one. So I've already got some paints on my palette knife. So I'm just going to do what I was doing before and just pull the palette knife into the center of the flower from the edge of the petal. And work my way from the outside in. And then, there we go. And then that is another petal for the moment, that's done. And then, okay, we're just going to tackle the more insides of the petal, which let me use, so my palette is here. I think I'm going to twist it around this way. Okay, so this is my palette, and I'm going to be using a bit more white. So let me scrape that off with my palette knife. And then, actually, I think I'm going to be working on this petal. So I'm going to do the opposite than I did for the other one. So I'm going to start from the inside of the petal and go towards the outside and just pull the oil paint up. And you can see it gives it a nice streaky texture because I just scraped the knife, I scraped the paint and I didn't properly blend it. So even though it is white, but it also has the other colors that I was using. And yeah, that creates a nice streaky texture. So I'm just going to continue doing that. Just kind of scrape it up or in the direction. And then I think I'm going to work from the outside in. So let me use some of my blue. Just going to scrape here like that. And then you can see it on the palette knife. And then scrape it outside in. So this is the same petal, it's just a different technique, or same technique but different colors. Yeah, it's created a bit of shading. Just gonna fill it in now, fill in this petal, and do a bit of spotting with my palette knife, just because it can create an interesting texture, more abstract texture, and define the outside. Yeah. Okay, we're just gonna leave that for now. In fact, I don't think I'm too happy with that. Where did I put my Bob Ross palette knife? You can tell that I really love Bob Ross because I'm using my Bob Ross palette and Bob Ross palette knife. So, okay, it's a bit messy. Let me just scrape it. It's got a bit of red on the palette knife, but that's fine. Still looks cool. Okay, and because we have a bit of white on the palette knife already, I think what I'm gonna do is add shade into this leaf. So if you look on the reference image, it's a bit lighter here in this section. So I'm just gonna shade it using my palette knife and go in a sort of zigzag motion to add some shading. So this painting has taken me 1 hour and 27 minutes, 30 seconds so far. Yeah, I've been told that I paint quite quickly, but I'm not too sure because I don't know how long it takes for other people to paint. And so I've added a bit more white to my palette knife, and I'm gonna add some some more shading, not shading, but add some more light shades to this bottom petal and scrape it up. So this rose is a bit more blue than the reference image. I did intend for this painting initially to be more pastel colors, but that's just not how it turned out. I do like when I'm painting to just, I have an idea in my head, but I don't mind just seeing how it goes and changing my mind as the painting goes along. So even though I had pastels in my mind, I don't mind that it's becoming more of a blue color because it's still nice. I do like blue. A lot of my paintings in my studio are actually blue anyway. For some reason, I always gravitate to blue. So I'm just adding the other petals now, just going from the outside of the petal towards the center. And yeah, I just really like the effect of the red underpainting because the red is just coming through everywhere. And to me, it just elevates the top colors and it looks so pretty. And I think it adds emotion to a painting, even though this is only a rose painting, so it's of a, it's a nature painting, but I still think that having a red underpainting underneath it adds emotion. Definitely. Okay, so let's work on. I mean, this isn't really a petal from the reference image. I think I just made that up in my mind, so I'm just gonna make something up. So this is the inside of the petal. I'm just gonna. Oh, I don't have any paint on my brush, so I think I'm actually just gonna do this color as magenta. I'm not really gonna add any other color, so I'm just at the moment. Oh, okay. Just going to take some of this magenta. I don't think it needs to be this much. Just going to put some back on the palette. Okay, so this is the thickness that I'm going to use. And add it to the canvas. Just scrape it upwards. And then do the same here. Just wanted to add a bit of a different color to my painting. And okay, I quite like this color, so I'm also going to use it in this corner. Let me do that. Yep, that's nice. Scrape it down. Yeah. So let me know what you think so far of my painting. Is it something you would have in your house, or you don't really have florals? I think most people like florals, actually, floral paintings. Men and women. That's just my opinion. So, okay. I'm going to work on this section now. Let me think for a few seconds. I think I want it to be a bit lighter. So I'm going to add, I'm going to mix whites with my palette knife. Okay. So it's already got some paint on here. So let me scrape it off onto my palette. Remove the paint. And I'm still going to be using this color. So all I need to do now is scrape some of the white and mix the white with my palette knife. And let me see. Yeah, I think that's a good color. Let me add a bit more white. A bit more white, I think. Okay, that's nice. So I'm just going to add this color to this petal and pull it upwards. And then to define the leaf, I'm just gonna, yep. So yeah, it's getting to the more difficult bit, which is the center, where all the petals come together. I'm just thinking about how to do it because the red underpainting has kind of, it's not very clear actually, but I think I'm just going to look at my reference image and not really follow the underpainting that I did, because I wasn't really being too accurate with my underpainting when it came to the center. And okay, so yeah, I'm going to use the edge of the palette knife to kind of sketch out the petals. Or I might not use this palette knife because it's quite big. I might use, I don't know, I think this is a better one. Or I'm not going to look for my other palette knives. I've got smaller versions of these, or of this. I've got a smaller one, but I'm not going to look for it right now. I should have looked for it beforehand. So I'm just adding the paint to the corner of the palette knife, and I'm going to Just... Do you know what? I've just thought of something that I'm going to do instead of this. So, okay. I'm going to use my paintbrush. Let's grab in my paintbrush. Don't think it has any paint on there. Okay, I'm going to use my paintbrush and grab my dark blue paint. Put my dark blue paint on my palette. Okay, let's use this blue. Blend it a bit with the darker blue. And just paint all of this dark blue. And then after I do that, I'm going to build on top of it with my palette knife with that technique I was just showing you. And yeah, I just thought to do that now because I quite already like the effect of how this looked. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if it was all shaded dark blue in the center? And then I just did the little, I don't know how to describe it, the little lines created with the palette knife, kind of raised on the top. Yeah. So just shading it in. And that's the beauty of oils, is that you can do something like that. And because I do like drips, so I'm going to dip my paintbrush in water, mix it around a bit, not really dab it off because I want the paint, the dark blue paint, to drip. In fact, it's not even dripping enough, so let me add more water. There we go, it's dripping more now. Look at that. You can't really see, but it's quite nice. And because I like drips and I've already got it on the paintbrush, let me just add some more drips to the top. It's raining oil paint. I'm doing this for no reason in particular other than I just like how it looks. Okay, that's fine. And since I've already got the dark blue on my paintbrush, I'm also going to look at my reference image and see what other places is dark, shaded darker, that I can add to here. And I can see that this can still be a bit darker, so I'm just going to drag my, oh, okay. My paintbrush is a bit too light at the moment, so I'm just going to add some darker blue. Okay, now that I've done that, just drag the dark blue to create more depth and shading. There we go. Okay. I'm satisfied with that for now, and let me put this paintbrush down until I need to use it again. My hands always get so messy when I'm painting, and I'm thinking about using some plastic gloves when I'm painting, so I don't need to wash it all the time. Sometimes I want to get snacks, and then I always have to wash my hands so I don't have to touch the doorknobs and get oil paint everywhere. Right, so what am I working on next? Okay, so as I said, oh no, not this palette. So as I said, I'm going to use this palette knife and mix there we go, just a little bit, and I'm just doing that to create the lines of the petals on the outside of the petals. It's quite a nice effect, I think. So I'm just mixing it again on the palette, as you can hear, and then okay, the next stage is to do this one. And that's why I said I need it would be nice to have my smaller palette knife because it's a bit more difficult than I thought it would be with this bigger palette knife. But you know, we have to make do with what we have sometimes. I think I watered this down too much because if the paint was a bit thicker, it would have been easier to add the purple. And now the purple sticking to the watery oil paint. That's fine. Just gonna find a different way of dabbing it since the go in a triangle circular motion. It's hurting my arms actually because this is a very awkward position for me to be in, how I'm sitting, just because of the camera angle. So I need a better setup for filming. So yeah, it's really difficult for the oil paint to come off onto the canvas because this part is very watery, so I actually should have thought of that. But you live and you learn. And hopefully you guys are learning from me too. Okay, so just gonna do a dot in the center. And I guess, yeah, that can be the center of the rose. I'm happy with that. Doesn't need to be too, because it's not, because this is an abstract painting, it's not a realism painting. So I'm actually happy with that. So I'm just going to work on the other areas. I might come back to the center a bit later on. So, okay, what bit am I going to work on now? Okay, let's add to this bit. I think I want to drag this leaf a bit out. So I'm just going to leaf. I say leaf, but I mean petal. In fact, I think I'm using the wrong palette knife for this one because I do enjoy using my Bob Ross palette knife. Just make the palette, the petal a bit longer. Make it come up here. Okay. And then I'm going to use, I think I'm going to use this browny red color. Can't remember the actual name unless I look at the actual tube. And what I'm going to do now is kind of drag it up the colors. Because this the oil paint is quite thick on my canvas, so this is actually going to take a few weeks to dry. Good idea about the fan. I like it. Thank you, JJ Taylor Buck. Okay. I was just reading the comments just then. Okay. Just gonna add. I mean, this painting is almost finished. I'm just adding some final details. And I do want to also add the stem and some leaves. I'm not going to do that in green. I think I'm going to add the leaves and the stem in yellow, just to add a bit of contrast to the dark blue at the bottom. But I'm still going to use this palette knife, so I'm just going to clean it with my paper towel. Just gonna... There we go. And I've already got some yellow on my palette. So, okay. Yeah, just use this yellow. I think this is quite a nice yellow colour. There we go. And, okay. For some reason, I don't like painting with green too often. I mean, I do use green sometimes, but it's my least favorite color, I think. Just gonna add the stem with my palette knife. And I think it would look interesting if the stem was a bit dragged out. So let's see how that looks if it was. So this is a stem, but I'm just dragging it in this direction. I guess I'm creating movement. Maybe there's a bit of wind. Yeah. Okay, and then it's gonna add a leaf here. Like there's a leaf here, so I'm just gonna add one. I'm using a bit more yellows and whites. Okay. This is my palette knife. Not gonna be too careful. Let me just drag it up from the top, I think. Be my leaf. Just blending it in with the blue a little bit, so the paint is still wet. Okay, that's one leaf. And should I do another leaf? I think I will do another leaf. I think it will look nice. So I'm going to do another leaf in a similar position to this one. So I'm just going to add it parallel, add it here as well. That's quite nice. And I think I'm going to take a bit more white up on with my palette knife. And I'm just going to sort of drag it down. So that is my second leaf. Just a bit more detail to my stem. Okay, so I've done step 3. Let me take you back to my learning objectives. So I've done the first layer, even though I didn't really do that with a large brush. I did it with my palette knife and a brush, and then I've used my palette knife to add textures and to color build, and then I'm actually on to step 4, which is and I think I'm within time, 70 minutes to 120 minutes, which is 2 hours, isn't it? And I don't think we've reached the 2 hour mark yet. So highlights, edges, and final adjustments. So yeah, let's use the last 10 minutes to add highlights to the painting. And I'm going to add highlights to the painting using this palette knife, still my Bob Ross palette knife, because I absolutely love it. And I'm going to just use my white paint, my white oil paint, to add highlights. And I'm not going to clean this paintbrush. I'm just going to use, not paintbrush, my palette knife. I'm just going to use the same palette knife just to scrape a bit more of my white paint onto it, just to add some thickness. And just, yeah, add the highlights to the edge of the petals. Some highlights here. This is a recent petal I added, isn't it? So I'll just add some highlights to the very, very edges. Some highlights here, more highlights to the edge of this one. Yeah, so this is the technique I use to paint. I like to use thick impasto style oil paint, and then my I can also paint. I might do another live where I paint an abstract portrait, but I can also paint very realistically as well. But I've moved away from that because I just find this technique more interesting. Just use some white to just kind of scrape down. So it looks like light sunlight is kind of coming down onto the rose. From the top. Let's add the streaks. Then just add some white streaks to the corner, just to add a bit more texture, just do a bit of a swirly effect. Swirly. And I do think this needs a bit more additional colors, so I'm actually going to use my sponge and borrow some of the white from the top, and maybe some of these yellows, and add it to the bottom right. Yeah, just give it a bit more color, not color, but a bit additional texture. I thought it was looking quite boring at the bottom. And something that I do as well, hopefully this doesn't ruin the painting, I do often finish my paintings off by just using my sponge and just going on top of the detail with my sponge, just to create a more interesting effect. And sometimes I just drag the paint down. I'm not sure. I don't think I'll do it too much to this one because I'm not sure how it will look with the roses. But definitely when I'm doing my figurative abstracts, I do a lot more dragging. I'm still gonna do it with this one. But not as much. And yeah, I think I'm just about done. I would like to add a lot more white to this section, so I'm just going to use my sponge. Let's try and get it in the frame. Use my sponge and drag a lot, like the remaining white, and just drag it. So it's more white. And yeah, I finished the painting off by painting the corners. I'm just going to use my sponge to paint the corners, or the edges even, not corners. And yeah, that is my live painting session, guys. So that took 2 hours, and that's the amount of time I wanted to spend on this painting. So I'm really happy that I finished this painting within 2 hours. So what I worked on today, just to summarize, was the underpainting. I did that with red acrylics, and then once I finished the underpainting, I went over it with my oil paints, with the background first, and then I worked on the rose and the flower last, and then I'm just adding the final details. Yeah, I've got 2 minutes left before I'm going to finish this live. If I could have found my small paintbrush, I would have treated you to seeing how I sign my painting. I would have just added my signature. I'm going to add my signature at another time, but in the bottom left, I'm going to use white paint and just sign my painting. And then, yeah, just leave it to dry for a few weeks. This oil painting is very thick. And yes, it's inspired by my previous floral painting. So I'm just going to get you to compare. So this is one that I worked on around 2 weeks ago. And this is something that I worked on today. And yeah, it took me 2 hours to complete, and I'm very pleased with it. And yeah, comment what you think. Let me know if you like anything. And yeah, give any feedback. If you like my content, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'll be doing more of these videos, and then I'll also be doing sort of paint and sip with me. And yeah, my hands, looking forward to doing more content.